This is Tony for the A Minute to Midnight Show. Folks, free speech in the West is under attack. And in this very simple video, I'm just going to play you a few clips that prove it. I think they're pretty self-explanatory about what is going on with the liberals and socialists controlling free speech. And make no mistake, this is actually going to be the catalyst that the New World Order and totalitarianism can use to bring everyone into subjection. Now, whether or not you like Alex Jones or you think he's a shill or a puppet, perhaps, is almost irrelevant in the case here. And the first person I'm going to look at is Alex Jones. Alex Jones and InfoWars was systematically removed by what appears to be a coordinated effort by big tech giants simultaneously a few days ago. The point is that if they can use the situation to call what he does hate speech, then it paves the way for them to do it to all of us in the alternative Christian media or conservative media. Once the conservative media has been silenced, then they can more easily pick off individuals who won't conform to the agenda of the New World Order. The elite puppet masters are quite happy to use protesters and use the media that they control as useful idiots in the end goal, which will be a one-world government that is totalitarian and where dissenters are silenced, and we can see the groundwork being very clearly laid for that now.
Talking about freedom of speech. Right now we're talking about the lights going out in America. Right now we're talking about broadcasters being subjected to censorship. And right now we have the man who is in the news, who I'm very, very happy to have on the program, Alex Jones. Alex, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Dr. Savage, really thank you for being one of the few in America that understands what's happening and defending free speech. It's great to be here during this very, very serious time.
Well, let's start with the people out there who do not know what's going on. Tell the audience at large what happened to you, where your program is broadcast and what happened.
Okay. Well, I mean, here's what's going on, bottom line. Hillary ran $18 million worth of ads against Trump, editing tapes of me to misrepresent what I've said about a bunch of different issues, sometimes on totally different issues, totally deceptive. And then they built that up after Trump won. And then have just been hyping it in the media for the last year and a half what a horrible person I am. Now, I'm not that big and important. I mean, your show's bigger than mine. But I figured it out. They said I'm an easy target because they can edit stuff I've said out of context. You're a little bit more careful than me, I'll be honest. They edit out of context. Then they say, okay, we want to ban Alex Jones off the web. And they start having the New York Times, the Washington Post. I mean, thousands of articles a week the last few months. And I said, listen, I'm no rocket scientist, but the only person more demonized than me is Trump. They're just using me as a test case. And then, boom, they start saying 3 weeks ago, oh, I was mean to transgenders, I was mean to Muslims, and I beat up a kid. Forbes said that I beat up a kid. We look at the videos they took down off YouTube. It's me covering Islamic invasion of Europe. It's that ABC News clip of the kid punching the adult in the face, and the guy pushes it down. And it's transgenders in schools, pole dancing for kids. So that's all I covered. So, A, they never show what I supposedly said. When they then defame me and say I'm involved in all this liberal hate speech, when they take me down. So they're using me as the example for deplatforming. Then, Sunday night, Monday morning, it hits.
When you say it hits, what does that mean? What happened to your program?
Total deplatforming on hundreds of podcast platforms, YouTube, Facebook, so many other platforms, Apple, iTunes, where we had tens of millions of subscribers just on iTunes, 2.5 million subscribers on YouTube. All of it is completely deleted. They don't even put strikes against the account. They don't claim we violated the rules. There is a Night of the Long Knives or Crystal Knot, a total purge of me. And then we learn a Democrat memo came out saying, this is on top of Drudge right now, that they're going to first purge me and then purge everybody else. Here's the headline out of Reason. Senate Democrats are circulating plans for government takeover of the Internet. Once that came out, okay, Senator Chris Murphy comes out and says, InfoWars is the tip of a giant iceberg of hate and lies that uses sites like Facebook and YouTube to tear our nation apart. That's the left. These companies must do more than take down one website. The survival of our democracy depends on it. They then called for talk radio to be restricted. That means you. They then called in the actual memo and his own statements for Fox News to be deplatformed.
Here is a short clip from my friend Fred at the ET Prepper YouTube channel.
I'm going to read this article from it's Brian Flood from Fox News. He writes about Senator Chris Murphy. Now, he's calling for Silicon Valley censorship. Survival of our democracy depends on it. Senator Chris Murphy thinks tech giants banning Alex Jones' InfoWars is a good start, but says the survival of our democracy depends on sites like Facebook, YouTube, etc., removing additional content. InfoWars is the tip of a gigantic iceberg of hate and lies.
That's got to be the biggest contradiction you'll ever hear. You save democracy by banning free speech. Oh, we could call it an oxymoron. Perhaps we should just take the oxy out of the word. Now let's just briefly look at another case where free speech has been curtailed and banned, and that is Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux.
It's my pleasure to announce here the presence of Lauren Southern, and the subject of this meeting here is what happened to her in the last few days in the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Gerald. My country used to be a bastion of free speech, and it is no longer. The free speech was curtailed. The hate crime, hate speech, which was brought in under Tony Blair's socialist government, has been continued. And has actually got worse under Theresa May when she was Home Secretary, and of course the woman is now the Prime Minister of Britain. Lauren had free movement across Europe. She went to Flanders, Belgium. She travelled through France, and then she was stopped by Kent police at Calais and prevented coming into our country under the Terrorism Act. She's been detained by Kent police. Now, Kent is in the southeast of England. It's in my constituency. I live in Kent. I brought my children up in Kent. And over the past few years, under the so-called Tories' austerity, 800 police officers were taken off the ranks and made redundant. And so we're wasting police resources, Kent police resources, on holding back a girl who is Canadian, who's actually a Commonwealth citizen, and in her passport it actually says the Queen requests that she has free and unimpeded travel. Yet Kent police will hold her back, but they've allowed 500 jihadis to slip in. I'm not saying it's Kent police's fault.
And in the last few days there was a fiasco of Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern's event being cancelled in New Zealand. Let's hear from them.
Yeah, it kind of sucks, but at the same time I think this does tell an important story and does kind of form an important show of what is happening in New Zealand and the crippling of free speech here, like in many places right now across the West. Basically what occurred is we were expecting to speak tonight at a wonderful venue. We had a call with them last night, and on the phone the venue owner knew who Steph and I were. They knew it was a controversial event, and they said, this is a venue that supports free speech. This is a venue that wants all opinions to be allowed here, and I understand you're controversial, but you will be allowed. Now, we usually wait a little bit before we announce what the actual venue is until right before the event, so that protesters can't really gather and it's just more secure overall. But as soon as 1 p.m., right, that we released the event?
Yeah.
1 p.m. today, we released the event name, and by 2 p.m., we got a call from the venue host, and just the guy was in absolute hysteria, saying, you cannot be on this property. Get off, get out of here. No more show.
Well, and if you're here in 10 minutes, I'm going to have you arrested
for
trespassing. So that's a tough place to negotiate from. And of course, we tried, but he was dead set on it. And the change in demeanor night before to the day is really quite extraordinary. And at some point, I'm sure we'll find out exactly what happened.
But this wasn't even the first venue that canceled. Of course, we had the mayor council, any of the government venues on us, despite the fact that these were supposed to be places that, these had been places that had held even radical Islamic talks before. And so that was canceled, and then we figured, well, we'll go to the free market and try to find a venue there. No problem, awesome, found one. But that was challenged with, I truly believe that there were strong forces involved, whether it be government calling this guy, threats.
Or they, you know, I was watching something tonight where they said, you know, Stefan Molyneux said some controversial things about Aborigines, right? And then they had a video of me on the stage. I'm like, great, they're going to cut to my speech and people can actually hear what I'm saying. No. None of that. They just went straight, like, he said controversial things. Here's a picture of him. We're not going to play you any sound. We're just going to move right back to the presenters. And it's like, it's so weird. It's like, this isn't us. This is like hand puppets. This is like caricatures. This is not actually things that we've said, arguments that we've made. It's like, these are goofy photos. This is a joke you made. This is me not being able to speak because they won't play any sound of my speech. Like, it's just so weird. It's like we're not even here in the country. There's just weird caricatures.
And the big thing, now that we've been shut down, we don't get to, other than, thank goodness, on this YouTube channel, we don't get to speak for ourselves. The people don't get to hear what we actually have to say. They get this perfectly curated image of what the media wants us to be saying. And the media do want us to say these things. They want their perfect villain. They want their people who are saying, we hate different races, we hate women. They want us to say that.
Well, they have to make us,
because they want a villain. They have to make us into villains. They wouldn't be so desperately trying to publish articles saying, alt-right activist says nuke Melbourne and all of this, right? They're desperate for villains. And the thing is, we're just not actually those villains. We're just here to have conversations that are really, really important for the future of this country. And I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm just willing to ask some of the questions that other people won't, and so are you. We just want to have a conversation with people. It's really disheartening, but hopefully this will wake some people up in New Zealand.
These caricatures, it's almost like the left or these people need these ogres, you know, they need these, like they're like rusty knights in search of imaginary dragons, because we were sort of joking, it's like, well, without us, what reason do they have to get out of bed in the morning, so to speak? And because we aren't what they imagine, they have to invent or create us in order to motivate themselves to create some heroic fight.
So yeah, they do have to create these villains. I mean, there were people out there protesting today, holding signs saying no to white supremacists, no to fascists. We're not white supremacists or fascists. Just
I'd say no to fascists too. I'm with you there.
And it sucks too, because a lot of these people out there, they've never heard a word of what we've said either. So they haven't made up their own minds. They're just repeating what the media have told them verbatim. And the media, they're not a particularly clever lot, are they? So that's a real sad way to base your opinion.
You know, here's a pro tip for all you leftists out there. There have been groups in history who have caricatured entire groups in negative light, and there have been significantly negative things that have occurred from that. You might not be playing for the team you think you're playing for, and that's an important thing to remember, that this dehumanization of the opposition is terrible. The other thing that bothers me too, and this bothers me about people who go after people like us. You're a Christian. I am into the non-aggression principle. I'm into the verbal arts of defense and advocation and argumentation and so on. So they know that we're not physically dangerous. They know that around us isn't some mysterious no-go zone where you know, you're going to get into trouble. Like all the people who pick on Christians and pick on, I wouldn't say I'm specifically a pacifist because I accept the right of self-defense, but I'm into the non-aggression principle. You don't see these people taking on radical Muslims. You don't see these people taking on the more violent elements within their own groups, because they know that there may be some element of personal risk. So it very much is fighting a paper tiger and calling yourself a hero. It's very cowardly.
This was in stuff.co.nz, quoting Prime Minister of New Zealand Jacinda Ardern. Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern's views are not welcome in New Zealand, she says. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand is hostile to the views of Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux, the far-right speakers who had an event cancelled last night. Ardern, speaking on her arrival back to Wellington after 6 weeks on maternity leave, was responding to comments from Molyneux that New Zealand was hostile to free speech. I think we're hostile to their views, Ardern said. They're here because there were no grounds to block them being here, but that does not mean we welcome their views. I think you'll see from the reaction that they have had from New Zealanders that their views are not those that are shared by this country, and I'm quite proud of that. Well, Jacinda Ardern, you do not speak for all New Zealanders, and in fact it's because of the media that has swayed people against Molyneux and Lauren Southern, who haven't got a clue on the most part what they even stand for. And interestingly, in another article on stuff.co.nz, it says Southern's views on immigration have prompted the New Zealand Federation of Islamic Associations to ask the government to bar her entry into New Zealand. In March, she was barred from entering the United Kingdom, with a Home Office spokesman saying her presence in the UK was not conducive to the public good, international media reported. Well, isn't it interesting? Tell me which Islamic country allows free speech and which Islamic country allows Christians free speech. And here we go, we see that the Islamic associations were one of those calling for the banning of Lauren Southern unsuccessfully to be allowed into New Zealand. Well, there are many more examples I could have used, but I think that states the case pretty clearly that free speech is under attack, and particularly it's going to affect Christians. And if you are in a church that is not speaking up against this sort of thing, I want to know why. Are you not warning people what's actually happening? We are going to face persecution, and the freedom of speech is going to come further and further under attack. And by the way, I'm not here to endorse the views of Lauren Southern and Stephen Molyneux or Alex Jones. That's not the point. The point is the right of free speech. If you don't agree with the Liberals and the Socialists, then they will try to silence you. And if you're a Christian, take note, we will be silenced if they get their way. I think that's about all I'm going to share in this video. Don't forget to like it and share it, and go to our website aminutemidnight.com, and we do run this entirely by donations. And we are always appreciative of your support, and thank you for taking the time to watch this video.